Before you turn this off, before you scroll away, pause for just a moment, because this message is through one more day. It is about the weight you have been carrying silently, the kind no one asks about. You have been strong for so long that even you forgot. What if you smile, you function, you show up, and everyone assumes you are fine, but deep down there is a tiredness. That sleep does not fix a weariness. That coffee cannot just you away. Say your place for first one play. This is for the woman who lies awake replaying the day, wondering if she did enough. The woman who prays quietly because she is too exhausted to explain everything. The woman who keeps going, not because she does okay, but because she does not feel she has permission to stop. You are not weak for feeling this way, and you are not alone in it, even if it feels that way. What if your tiredness is not a sign that something is wrong with you, but a sign that something holy has been asked of you for too long without rest? What if the silence you are in is not punishment, but preparation? And what if not asking you to try harder, but to come closer and let Him speak into the places where you feel unseen, unheard, and empty? If you have ever whispered, "I am tired," but kept going anyway, this message is for you. You feel tired in places you cannot explain to anyone, because the exhaustion you carry is not only physical, is emotional, spiritual, and deeply hidden behind responsibilities and expectations. And this is exactly where God's attention rests, not on the loud strength you show, but on the quieter from the world. He sees what no the morning's rumblings when you keep going, even though tails before you are ready, because others depend on you. And you tell some this is just warning. I'm not from it because before why warning this or the knows for one's modernized. God sees the exhaustion you do not post about, the tears you stop before they fall, the prayers you begin but cannot finish because too heavy to form. He sees the invisible labor of loving people and to not understand you, caring for others while neglecting yourself, of being emotionally present even when you're spiritually drained. And this kind of come from weariness, it comes causing fitfulness again when worthy what a easy rate comes from and then looking with the film. Work for the Lord is all you one of our nation. You may feel overlooked because the word only celebrates visible effort, but God notices what happens in secret. He sees the nights you replay conversations in your mind, wondering if you do the right thing. He sees the internal battles where you argue with yourself, the strength it takes for you to hold everything together when you feel like falling apart, and He is compassionate toward you because He knows how much you have print nowhere. He feel and get fallen over this. You with yourself just in full battle. There are burdens you never named out loud because you thought you had to be strong, burdens tied to family expectations, emotional wounds, past disappointments, and quiet fears, and you learned to live with that weight so long it started to feel normal. But God never intended for you to normalize exhaustion. He intended for you the fact that you bring it to there is evidence that you have been trying to carry what was never meant to risk your children. God sees the cost of obedience, the sacrifices you made that no one thinks understood you, the times you chose integrity over comfort and faith over ease. And obedience often fulfills because it requires trust before reward and surrender before relief. And when you feel worn down, it means you stayed faithful through resistance, and God does not overlook faithfulness. The owner, even when the outcome feels, the owner does not overlook faithfulness. For beast for variation, for warning, murder love fails delayed. You may wonder why God allows you to feel this exhausted if He truly sees you, but seeing does not always mean immediate removal. Sometimes seeing means sustaining you, and God's awareness of your tiredness is not passive, it is active. He is near to the brokenhearted and close to those who feel spent and unseen. And when you feel like no one understands fully your fatigue, He understands it fully without explanation. Well, we'll we hunt explanation. There is comfort in knowing that you do not have to exaggerate your pain for God, to notice that you do not have to prove how tired you are. He already knows the weight behind your silence, the meaning behind your sighs thinner than it used to. And He is not asking you to push harder. He is inviting you to rest deeper, not just physically. Stop pretending you are fine. Stop pretending you are fine and to be all you feel. You feel. God sees the tired woman behind the capable exterior, the one who holds everything together for everyone else, while quietly unraveling inside. And He has not asked strength for Him. He is offering you permission to when you find without shame to admit that you were empty and need to be refilled. And when you finally stop hiding your exhaustion, is the beginning of restoration that starts not with doing more, but with being not exactly as you are more. You found me, see, you love. You have been telling yourself that if you were stronger, that real faith would not feel so heavy, and that capable women do not reach this level of awareness. But this belief has quietly wounded you. That it is actually a sign of devotion, not defeat. The tiredness you feel did or weak appeared because you stayed when it was hard. You remain easy to continue to shovel up long. After there is a kind of exhaustion that comes from avoiding responsibility, and then there is the exhaustion that comes from carrying it faithfully day after day. And your weariness belongs to the steps that emotionally available, spiritually can avail this. And this kind of endurance costs those small choices and dramatic moments, but to what someone else lose, put someone of those choices out, Stew of soul lives to the loves. Keep word for You were never meant to run endlessly without rest. Even the strongest structures require support and renewal. And the facts not mean you are fragile. It means you have been operating beyond human limits, and faith was never meant to cancel your humanity, was meant to anchor goat. Did not design you. He designed you to be in every send and rendering you strength. He has an invitation to rely on something. Be heard and or something. You have mistaken endurance for obligation, thinking that if you stop, everything will fall apart. And if you rest, you will disappointness. It reveals its depth, because only someone who trusts God can step back without fear. Rest says, I believe God is still in control even when I am not activating everything. And this kind of trust requires more courage than continuity, because it forces you to really, because you want more courage than posture tapping. But it's a fall of philosophy, more leaving family. Your tiredness has also been shaped by the emotional labor you carry silently, the understanding, the comforting, the forgiving, the adjusting yourself to keep peace and meet expectations, emotional but heavy, and when it is unacknowledged. And God sees that even more the draining energy it takes to stay kind when you are hurt, to stay patient, and to keep making when wicked needs feel unmet. Work and miss does not make you deeply human. When He wants you narrow, you see human. You may feel ashamed for needing rest because you equate value with productivity, but your worth has never been measured by breaking. God does not admire burnout. He values obedience, burst, and when you collapse from exhaustion is not because you lack faith, but because you tryingly were limitless, and were limited is limitless, and recognizing your limits is not surrendering responsibility, is recognizing your limits, is not aligning your limits, is literally surrendering pride. There is strength in acknowledging that you cannot do everything and be everything for everyone. There is strength in pausing, for resentment grows and bitterness settles in, and God would rather you rest honestly and serve resentfully, because love given from emptiness eventually becomes obligation, and obligation slow, dry, and never intended your service, your love, or your obedience to cost love, or your obedience to cost of you your peace. Your weariness is not a warning that you are failing spiritually. It is a signal that you have been pouring out without refilling, and God does not shame you for to come closer, receive what you have been giving away. And when you finally allow yourself to rest, you will realize that stepping back to diminish your strength, it renews it. And God's surrender does not weaken you, it
become the smallest coins before it is spent, but turn there's over spiritual and quite restore it. What it would come in was man restored, even though it was in a warning way. Would you not unbury yourself to the getting down?
You have reached a place where your own strength no longer carries you the way it once did, and this can be being incapable, used to pushing through, used to finding a way even when the path was unclear, but now effort feels heavier and motivation feels thinner because something has gone wrong. It is not to have what human strength can do or wrong, and this is often the exact place where God begins to work most clearly. God's strength does not compete with yours, it complements it, and when you are full of energy and confidence, it is easy to rely on realizing it. But when you are emptied, when your solutions run out, and your resolve feels fragile, you are final, but in a way that strength often quicks, and this openness, and it says it is the doorway through which divine strength flows. God does pour his power into clenched fists. He pours it through which life therefore falls. When you reoccurs of my worker parents. You have been taught that strength means control and independence, but God's strength reveals exhaustion can feel so uncomfortable it forces you to admit that you cannot carry everything anymore. And yet this admission is exactly what allows God to carry with you. And for you, the moment you stop striving to prove that you are capable is the moment you begin to experience a different kind of strength, one that does not drain you, but the moment you sustains you. When your own strength runs out, you stop pretending that you have answers, you stop forcing outcomes, and you stop measuring yourself by results, and this creates space for trust, and trust is where God's power operates most, shifts the weight from your shoulders to His, and this shift does not happen when you feel strong enough to manage life on your own. It happens when you finally say, I cannot do this without you, Midas. When you finally say, there is a quiet power that comes when you stop pushing and start leaning, and this power does not arrive with noise or instant solutions. It arrives as peace, clarity, endurance. It does not come from adrenaline or pressurance, and God does not always remove the struggle immediately, but He strengthens you within it, and this inner strength allows you to continue without losing yourself in the process. You may feel disappointed in yourself for feeling weak, for not being able to do what you once did, but God is not disappointed in you, and He understands that seasons change, and that transitions look like in different seasons. Sometimes strength looks like endurance, and sometimes it looks like rest. It's like asking for help, and it all occurs for all of these forms are and goes eyes. God's strength is not about making you unstoppable, it is about making you supported. And when you rely on Him, you discover that you do not have to be everything for everyone. You do not have to fix every problem or carry every burden. And this realization brings relief because it frees you from the pressure of self-reliance and invites you into partnership with God, where your responsibility is obedience and His responsibility is obedience, and His number symbol your responsiveness of come. When you allow God's strength to meet you at the end of your own, you stop fearing exhaustion because you understand reaching your limit. It is the transition point from self-effort to divine support, and this does not make life effortless, but it makes it sustainable. And when you begin to operate from this place, you find that you can keep moving forward without constantly breaking down, because you are no longer running on this presently bricking one, no longer running on yourself alone. Your weakness does not disqualify you from God's work, it positions you for it, because God's strength is made visible where human strength fades. And when you stop hiding your limitations and start trusting God, what you thought was that your strength was actually the beginning of something deeper, steadier, and more enduring that carries you not. Because God always are being always, when you know where you run, there are moments when the silence feels heavier than the struggles of it, and nothing seems to move. And in that quiet space, doubt begins to whisper that maybe you have been overlooked, maybe God has lost among others. Answer everyone else first. And this is where the feeling of being forgotten slowly settles into your heart, not because you stop believing, but because waiting with not reassurance, you stop believing, but because reassurance. You replay your prayers in your mind, wondering if you asked the wrong way, if you waited too long, or if there is something about it disqualifies you from being heard, and unanswered prayers have a way of making you question your worth even when you know better intellectually, because emotionally silence feels personal, and it can convince you that God's attention has shifted elsewhere and that you are now on your own. But being unanswered is not the same as being unheard, and delay is not the same as denial in God's timings, even when it feels like it. And the truth is that God often works instead of hid before are revealed, shaping outcomes beneath the surface long before anything changes visibly. And just because you cannot see movement does not mean that nothing means something is being prepared beyond your awareness. when your awareness. You are not forgotten when prayers feel unanswered. You are being held in understand, and this process can feel lonely because it does not come with constant reassurance or clear explanations. But God does not abandon people in silence. He meets them, teaching them to listen differently. Rest information, not crushed into comfort and motion, not boot in moments of immediate answers, but in seasons of waiting months, seasons of waiting. You have watched others receive what they prayed for a while. You continue waiting. Comparison made the silence louder because you wonder why their prayers were answered quickly while yours seemed suspended and invisible. But God's relationship with you is personal, not comparative. And what He is doing in your measured by what He is doing in someone else's. Because timing is not a reflection of favor, it is a remission of purpose. I live for wipers. Sometimes God withholds an answer not because He is distant, but because the answer requires preparation within you and around you that you cannot yet see. And if He gave you what you asked for too soon, it could harm you or distract you or pull you into something you are not ready to carry. And protection often looks like delay, even though it feels. Because wisdom often feels like silence before it feeds. Often feels like relief. You may feel forgotten because the season is long and your strength is wearing thin, and waiting without clarity can make you feel exposed and uncertain, but God does not forget those He loves, and He does not lose track of promises He has spoken when time stretches beyond your expectations, and the length of waiting does not diminish the certainty of fulfillment. It only deepens the foundation upon which He will rest. In the silence, God is often shifting your focus from outcome to relationship, from answers to presence, from control to trust. And while you are waiting, He is steadying your heart, strengthening your character, and teaching you how to lean on Him without needing constant evidence. And this kind of faith is quiet, resilient, and rooted, but it grows best in seasons where you must choose to believe with immediate proof. You may not feel remembered because there is no sign yet, but God's remembrance is not tied to visible results. It is tied to covenant and commitment, and He does not forget what He has promised, nor does He overlook the pain of waiting. And even when it feels nothing is changing, He is attentive to every emotion, every tear, and every moment of discouragement you endure. When prayers feel unanswered, it is easy to assume abandonment, but often it is an invitation to trust that God is working in ways used not rejection but refinement, and His silence is not forgetfulness but faithfulness, unfolding at a pace that aligns with His wisdom rather than your urgency. And numbed in the quiet, you are not overlooked. You that has seen knowing even when it feels or swell. Really slow. You have been afraid of rest because somewhere along the way you learned that stopping meant flowing down, losing ground, and that taking a step back would undo everything you worked so hard to build. And this belief has kept you moving even when your body asked you to pause and your soul begged for quiet rescue into a gift. And you started measuring your failure rather than how much Rest feels uncomfortable because it requires release, and release feels risky when you believe everything depends on you. But rest was never meant to be an escape from responsibility, it was to be an act of obedience, because God never asked you to carry everything alone. He asked you to trust Him enough to stop striving and allow Him to work beyond your effort. And when you ignore rest, you are not being faithful. You are ignore rest, war, assuming role that are yours. You were taught to equate rest with laziness and productivity with worth. So when you slow down, guilt follows you should be doing holding things together. And this inner pressure convinces you that rest is quitting. But quitting comes from hopelessness, while rest comes from quitting says, I believe God is anymore. But rest says, I believe God is working even when I'm still, and this difference changes everything. What the word is everything. Rest is obedience because God commanded it, knowing that constantly harden your heart and exhaust your faith. He built rhythms into life not to limit you. And when you refuse to rest, you quietly say, I know better than God about what I need. And this mindset does not come from strength, from fear that if you stop, everything will fall apart. Fear that you will be forgotten. Fear that your value will obedience means trusting that God sustains what you probably fear of living on earth or more than none but few to stay what will release. Rest requires humility because it forces you to admit that you are not indispensable, and this admission can feel threatening when you're identifying how much you do for others. But rest teaches you that your worth is not based on output, and that God's plans are not fragile, they do not collapse. Because you pause, they do not fail. Because you slept, they are held by God, not by answers, but not by God, by your constant effort. You have been running because you thought rest would cost you momentum, but constant motion without renewal eventually costs you clarity, joy, and peace in God. Would rather you slow down intentionally than be forced to stop through burnout, illness, or emotional collapse. Rest is preventative grace, not punishment. And choosing it is not weaklash, it is wisdom. Trust is tested most when you stop doing, because action gives you the illusion of control, and rest removes that illusion. It asks you to sit with uncertainty, to release outcomes you cannot manage, and to believe that God is still active even when you are not visibly working, and is not passive. It is deeply active faith, because it resists panic and refuses to rush of God's timing. When you rest, you declare that God is sufficient without your constant, He is capable without your oversight, and that His power does not require your exhaustion to function. And this declaration is obedience because it aligns your life with truth rather than fear. Rest does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means placing responsibility in this for your part and trust God place with a door part and trust God with the rest. You have been afraid that if you rest, you will fall behind, but God does not measure progress the way you do. He values alignment over speed and obedience over urgency. And sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is pause long enough to hear Him again, because exhaustion clouds discernment, and noise drowns sounds. Direction, rest, clear space, or wisdom to return. Rest is not a reward for finishing everything. It is a requirement for continuing well, and God is not asking you to earn rest by collapsing. He is inviting you to choose it, and when you finally allow yourself to rest, you'll begin to experience one that flows from trust rather than rather than fear. And that place rest be declaration that God is God and you are what? And that trust is stronger than control. But it's God and you are not, and that trust to wrestling or control. You have been asking God to take things away, to remove the weight, to change the situation, to lighten the load, and while sometimes does remove burdens, there are seasons when He does something deeper. He restores while you are still carrying responsibility. And this can feel confusing because you expected relief to cope fewer demands, but instead you find strength coming through a renewed sense of self and purpose. God does not always restore by subtracting tasks or erasing challenges, because your exhaustion is not only about what you are doing, it is also about how you see yourself. With humility can quietly responsive your identity until you become defined by roles, expectations, and performance. And when that happens, even meetings will be longer. The honor operating work longer of what for one not longer what. We want a Korean operating one, one you word one new. Restoration begins when God reminds you of who you are beneath the roles you carry. You are not only a caregiver, provider, peacemaker, or problem solver. You are first a daughter chosen, loved, and known. And when identity drifts into function, the soul grows tired, resisting under pressure instead of purpose. And God's restoration on misalignment, bringing you back to yourself before changing your circumstances. You have been tired not just because you do a lot, but because you have been trying to be everything. Slowly erodes your sense of self until you feel invisible even in your own life. And God restores, reconnecting you to the truth that your value is not dependent on how much you accomplish or how many people rely on you. Your worth was established long before these responsibilities were before these rots in your hands. When God restores identity, He changes how you carry what remains. The load may still exist, but it no longer crushes you because it is no longer tied. You can set boundaries without fear, and you can release outcomes without anxiety because you are prove your referral. Federal conscious relief even before external circumstances sent. They simply believe before the circumstances change. God understands that if He only removed responsibilities, what you would eventually pick up the same patterns again, because exhaustion rooted in identity cannot by circumstantial change alone. So it's He works for the teaching you how to live from acceptance rather than profit, from belonging rather than present performance, and from trust rather than control. You may feel disappointed that your life still feels full even after you began to rest and trust, but restoration is often subtle before it is obvious. It begins with clarity returning where confusion once lived, with peace replacing urgency, and with compassion on yourself where judgment once dominated. And these internal changes are signs that God is healing the source. Where is it? Not of God. Just healing this worriness, the symptom. When identity is restored, responsibility becomes manageable rather than overwhelming because you are no longer carrying it as a measure of your worth. You are carrying it as an assignment entrusted to you, and entrusted to and fulfilled with grace rather than pressure when they are not tied to identity. God ever intended your calling to consume your sense of self. He intended it to flow from it. You are learning that being restored does not mean having nothing to do. It means knowing who you are while you do it. And this knowledge protects you from burnout because it anchors you in truth. When demands increase and expectations rise, and when you remember who you are, you can carry responsibility without losing yourself in it. God's restoration is gentle and patient. It does not rush you into change. It reorients, strength returns back to your center, not because life is suddenly easy, but because you are no longer carrying it with a fractured sense of self. And when identity is restored, even responsibility feels lighter. Because if a longer burden, you are the role you step into canoeing, you or the redder you must love, You have heard a message meant to meet you exactly where you are, not as a command stronger, but as an invitation to be honest about how tired you have been. And through every truth spoken, one thing remains clear: God sees you fully. He understands the weight you have been carrying, the faithfulness, and bring you the silentness that
reshaped you and is going to love and ending longer than your own strength could set full in, and during longer really the word moving
This message was not about fixing everything at once. It was about shifting how you see yourself. In the middle of it all, you were reminded that tiredness does not mean weak. Strength is not failure, but the doorway to God's strength and unanswered prayers are not about it. That's how removing restoration begins. Not by removing truth, how you carry life. Your life changes how you carry life. Even Kiru is if you chant remember, does not mean no one behind the rest of you promise. You are not behind, you are not forgotten, and you are not alone in this striving, and start trusting to release control without losing faith. And Tourette's not small, it is sacred, because it allows God to work in you before working through you. And when you begin to live from an identity rather than exhaustion, then grace rather than fear, you to steadily and trust the strength for grace rather than free. May you move forward with gentleness toward yourself and confidence in God's presence. With you, may you learn to rest without apology, to trust without needing immediate answers, and to carry responsibility without losing who you are. And may this season mark not the moment you broke, but the moment you were restored from the inside out. Good luck as you step into the days ahead with renewed perspective and quieter strength. And thank you for taking the time to listen to this message. Receive it, hold it close, and remember, you are seen, you are loved, and you are never walking alone.